A female Marine sniper is arrested in court. Then the Admiral calls her name and chaos erupts. To the courtroom, she looked like just another face in the crowd. But when the evidence turned on her, silence shattered into screams. Handcuffed, accused, betrayed. They thought they could bury her with lies. But they had no idea who she really was, or the deadly truth she carried. What secret ties her to the Admiral? And why is the military so desperate to shut her down? When the system turns on its own, who survives the fallout? Every time I see your comments, it reminds me how stories connect us all. Let me know where you're watching from and let's get started. The military courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell sat in the back row of the gallery, her auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her plain blue sweater and khaki pants helped her blend in with the other observers. Just another face in the crowd of concerned family members and curious onlookers. But beneath her calm exterior, her trained eyes constantly scanned the room, taking in every detail with the precision that had made her one of the Marine Corps' most elite snipers. At the front of the courtroom, Admiral James Kellerman sat tall behind the bench, his silver hair and weathered face reflecting years of military service. His stern expression gave nothing away as he reviewed the documents before him. Clarissa studied his movements, noting the slight stiffness in his right shoulder, a common trait among veterans who'd seen combat. Lieutenant Colonel Harris Draven sat at the defense table, his uniform pristine and his posture rigid. To most observers, he appeared every inch the decorated military officer, but Clarissa's trained eye caught the subtle signs of tension, the occasional clenching of his jaw, the way his fingers drummed almost imperceptibly against the table's surface. "The prosecution may proceed," Admiral Kellerman announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom. The prosecuting attorney rose, straightening his uniform. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Lieutenant Colonel Draven systematically sold classified intelligence to foreign operatives, putting American lives at risk for his own financial gain." Clarissa's fingers tightened slightly on her knee as she listened. Her mind drifted to the countless missions she'd completed, where reliable intelligence had meant the difference between life and death. The thought of an officer betraying that trust made her stomach turn. As the prosecutor laid out the case, Clarissa's thoughts wandered to her own experiences in Afghanistan. She remembered the weight of her rifle, the feel of the desert wind, the absolute focus required to make impossible shots that saved American lives. None of those missions appeared in her official record. The nature of her work meant operating in shadows, leaving her achievements known only to a select few. Admiral Kellerman leaned forward slightly as the prosecution presented documentation of suspicious transfers to offshore accounts. His pale blue eyes narrowed, and Clarissa recognized the look of a man who'd seen enough combat to know how precious military intelligence could be, and how devastating its compromise could become. "The transactions coincide perfectly with confirmed intelligence leaks," the prosecutor continued. "Each leak put our operations at risk, and in at least 3 instances, forced us to abort crucial missions." Draven maintained his composed facade, but Clarissa noticed a bead of sweat forming at his temple. She'd learned to read the smallest signs of stress during her years as a sniper, where understanding human behavior could be as important as understanding ballistics. The gallery remained still as the prosecution wrapped up their initial presentation. Clarissa observed the other attendees, junior officers taking notes, a few reporters scribbling in notebooks, and what appeared to be Draven's family members, their faces tight with concern. "The defense may prepare to present their case after the recess," Admiral Kellerman announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of service. As the courtroom began to stir, Clarissa remained seated, watching Draven confer with his defense team. Something about his demeanor bothered her, not the nervous tension of an innocent man wrongly accused, but something more calculated, more dangerous. She thought about her own current status, officially on leave, unofficially maintaining a low profile while following this case that had caught her attention through certain irregularities she'd noticed in mission reports. Her instincts, honed through years of high-stakes operations, told her there was more to this story than what was being presented in court. Admiral Kellerman stood, preparing to exit for the recess. For a brief moment, his eyes swept across the gallery, passing over Clarissa without a second glance. She was used to being overlooked, It was an asset in her line of work. Few would guess that the quiet woman in civilian clothes was one of the Marine Corps' most lethal assets, capable of making shots that seemed impossible to most marksmen. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Clarissa remained in her seat, appearing to check her phone while actually observing Draven's interactions with his legal team. Their whispered conversations seemed urgent, their gestures more animated than one might expect from a team confident in their defense. Little did she know that her careful observations would soon place her at the center of a storm that would challenge everything she stood for. But for now, she was content to watch and wait, as she had done so many times before in much more dangerous situations. Her training had taught her that patience and observation were often the best weapons in any warrior's arsenal. The defense attorney rose from his seat with deliberate slowness, clutching a thick manila folder. His confident smirk sent a ripple of tension through the courtroom. "Your Honor, we have uncovered evidence that will not only exonerate Lieutenant Colonel Draven, but will expose the real perpetrator of these crimes." Admiral Kellerman leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped before him. "Proceed, Counselor." "The prosecution has made much of the access codes used to retrieve classified information," the attorney continued, approaching a screen at the front of the courtroom. "But they failed to investigate how those codes were obtained in the first place." The lawyer pressed a button, and security footage filled the screen. The black and white video showed a figure in marine utilities entering a restricted area, typing at a computer terminal. The timestamp matched one of the dates when intelligence had been compromised. "Using advanced facial recognition software, we have identified the individual responsible." The attorney's voice carried a note of theatrical triumph as he zoomed in on the grainy image. "This is Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell, a Marine sniper with high-level security clearance." Clarissa's heart stopped. Her fingers dug into her knees as she stared at the doctored footage, her mind racing to understand how they had manufactured such convincing evidence. The woman in the video moved like her, was built like her, but Clarissa knew with absolute certainty she had been halfway across the world on a classified mission on that date. More images appeared on the screen: bank statements, email exchanges, travel records. Each piece of evidence had been meticulously crafted to create a perfect illusion of guilt. The defense attorney's voice grew more animated as he wove the false narrative. Sergeant Hartwell's sniper training gave her the perfect cover for conducting surveillance. Her security clearance provided access to the very systems that were compromised. The evidence shows regular deposits to an offshore account registered under an alias we've linked to her. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Clarissa felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning toward her. Her training kept her exterior calm, but her mind whirled with the implications. This wasn't a random frame-up. Someone had studied her movements, her background, her entire career to construct this deception. Admiral Kellerman's gaze swept the courtroom, settling briefly on Clarissa. A flicker of something, recognition, uncertainty, crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "These are serious allegations, Counselor. Do you have supporting documentation?" "Yes, Your Honor." The attorney held up the manila folder. "We have detailed reports connecting Sergeant Hartwell to each instance of compromised intelligence. We also have witness statements confirming her presence at key locations." Clarissa's tactical mind kicked into high gear, analyzing escape routes, calculating odds. But she knew running would only confirm their lies. Her fingers brushed against the wooden bench, grounding herself in the reality of the moment as her world tilted on its axis. "Given the gravity of these revelations," the defense attorney announced, "we move for immediate action to secure the suspect." Admiral Kellerman frowned, lines deepening around his eyes. "Sergeant Hartwell is present in this courtroom?" "Back row, Your Honor, blue sweater." Two military police officers moved swiftly through the gallery. Clarissa remained perfectly still as they approached, her sniper's discipline holding firm even as her pulse raced. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom. "Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell," one MP announced formally, "you are under arrest for espionage, treason, and conspiracy to commit acts against the United States government." As they led her toward the front of the courtroom, Clarissa caught Lieutenant Colonel Draven's eye. His face showed appropriate shock, but she saw the smallest hint of satisfaction in the corners of his mouth. He had orchestrated this perfectly, using her as a convenient scapegoat while destroying her reputation in the process. The gallery erupted in confused whispers and exclamations. Reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks, while military personnel exchanged startled glances. The prosecuting attorney stood frozen, blindsided by this unexpected turn of events. Admiral Kellerman watched the scene unfold with growing disquiet. His hand absently rubbed his right shoulder, an old wound from Afghanistan acting up. Something about the sergeant tugged at his memory, but the connection remained frustratingly out of reach. Clarissa walked with quiet dignity between the MPs, her head held high. Years of operating in the shadows had taught her to control her expressions, to reveal nothing. But inside, her mind was already shifting from shock to analysis, calculating what this frame-up meant and who had the resources to orchestrate it so thoroughly. As she passed the defense table, she noted how Draven's performance was perfect, the right mix of surprise and righteous vindication, but she had spent too many hours studying human behavior through a scope to be fooled. In his eyes, she saw not the shock of an innocent man, but the calculated satisfaction of a predator whose trap had just sprung perfectly. The concrete walls of the military detention center echoed with the steady rhythm of footsteps. Clarissa sat perfectly still on the narrow bunk, her back straight despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. The orange jumpsuit felt foreign against her skin, but she wore it with the same quiet dignity she brought to her marine utilities. Through the small window of her cell, afternoon sunlight cast sharp shadows across the floor. Each ray reminded her of time passing, time she needed to understand how someone had constructed such an elaborate frame-up. The security footage had been perfect, down to the way she typically moved. Someone had studied her, learned her patterns, and used that knowledge against her. 2 cells down, a detained Marine was shouting about his rights. Clarissa tuned out the noise, focusing instead on reviewing every detail from the courtroom. The bank statements, the email exchanges, the travel records, each piece had been meticulously crafted. This wasn't just about saving Draven. Someone wanted her specifically to take the fall. "Chow time," a guard announced, unlocking her cell. In the mess hall, other detained Marines gave her a wide berth. Her reputation had preceded her, the decorated sniper turned traitor. Clarissa accepted their judgment without reaction, knowing that appearances could be deceiving. She'd learned that lesson well through her scope. Meanwhile, across the base, Staff Sergeant Tommy Santos sat at his computer terminal, his usually neat desk cluttered with printouts and notes. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed hours of searching through records, but determination kept him focused. "You're wasting your time, Santos," Lieutenant Rogers said, pausing by his desk. "The evidence is solid." Tommy looked up from his screen, his expression firm. "Sir, with respect, I've known Clarissa Hartwell for 6 years. She's the most honorable Marine I've ever served with. Something's not right here." "The security footage is too perfect," Tommy interrupted, then added a hasty, "Sir." He pulled up the video on his screen. "Look at these timestamps. According to this, Sergeant Hartwell was accessing restricted systems on March 15th at 2300 hours, but I know for a fact she was deployed that entire month. I helped process her deployment paperwork myself." Lieutenant Rogers frowned. "Those deployments were classified." "Exactly." Tommy's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Which means whoever fabricated this evidence didn't have access to her real deployment schedule. They picked dates that seemed plausible, but they didn't know where she actually was." Back in detention, Clarissa sat cross-legged on her bunk, eyes closed in meditation. The guard had called it lights out, but sleep wasn't her priority. She was mentally mapping every person who might have had access to her service records, her security clearance details, her movement patterns. The sound of boots on concrete drew her attention. A guard appeared at her cell, accompanied by a familiar face that made her heart lift slightly. "5 minutes," the guard said, letting Tommy Santos step up to the bars. "You look terrible in orange," Tommy said with a weak smile. "Everyone looks terrible in orange," Clarissa replied quietly. "You shouldn't be here, Tommy." "Where else would I be?" He gripped the bars, lowering his voice. Listen, I've been looking at the footage. The timestamps don't match your deployment schedule. Whoever did this didn't have access to your classified records. Clarissa's eyes sharpened. That narrows the field. I'm going through every system access log, every security checkpoint record. There are inconsistencies, small ones, but they're there. Tommy's voice carried absolute conviction. I'm going to figure this out, Clarissa. I know you're innocent. Be careful, she warned. Whoever orchestrated this has resources and influence. They'll have contingency plans. Tommy straightened his shoulders. I'm not afraid of them. You're my friend, and you're one of the finest Marines I've ever known. I'm not letting them destroy your reputation like this. The guard returned, signaling time was up. As Tommy turned to leave, Clarissa called softly, Tommy? Thank you for believing in me. Always, he replied without hesitation. After Tommy left, Clarissa returned to her bunk, but her posture was slightly less rigid now. In the darkness of her cell, she allowed herself a small smile. She had trained herself to operate alone, to trust only her own judgment and skills. But having someone believe in her, someone willing to fight for the truth, gave her renewed strength. She closed her eyes, not to sleep but to think. Tommy's discovery about the deployment records was significant. It meant her accusers had blind spots, vulnerabilities in their carefully constructed deception. And if there was one crack in their story, there would be others. The night settled over the detention center, but in his office, Tommy Santos was just getting started. His computer screen glowed as he dug deeper into records, cross-referencing dates, checking access logs. Pictures and notes covered his bulletin board, connected by red strings as he mapped out the conspiracy. His unwavering faith in Clarissa drove him forward, turning him from a skilled digital forensics specialist into a determined investigator. Someone had tried to destroy his friend's life and honor. They were about to learn that loyalty, when backed by determination and skill, was a force to be reckoned with. Tommy's eyes burned from staring at his computer screen for hours, but he couldn't stop now. Something about the security footage kept nagging at him. He played it again, frame by frame, watching Clarissa's figure move through the restricted area. The movements were fluid, natural, almost too perfect. Wait a minute, he muttered, leaning closer. He zoomed in on Clarissa's face as she turned toward the camera. The lighting hit her features at an odd angle, creating a barely perceptible disconnect between her head and neck. Tommy's heart began to race. He'd seen something similar before, during a digital forensics training course. He quickly opened specialized analysis software and began running the footage through various filters. Got you, he whispered as the program highlighted subtle inconsistencies in the video. The face was Clarissa's, perfectly mapped onto someone else's body using advanced deepfake technology. It was sophisticated work, far beyond what an amateur could produce. In the detention center, Clarissa sat in the common area, maintaining her composed demeanor despite the hostile stares from other detained Marines. A muscular sergeant named Rodriguez approached her table. How does it feel? Rodriguez sneered. Betraying everything the Corps stands for? Clarissa met his gaze steadily. I haven't betrayed anything or anyone. The evidence says different, another Marine chimed in. Evidence can lie, Clarissa replied quietly. People can lie. The truth doesn't. Back at his desk, Tommy was building a comprehensive case. He created a timeline, marking the dates when the doctored footage showed Clarissa accessing restricted areas. Each instance corresponded with actual security breaches, but the real perpetrator had carefully covered their tracks. He noticed something else. Every time Clarissa had supposedly accessed the systems, Lieutenant Colonel Draven had been on base, usually working late. Tommy started digging deeper into Draven's records, looking for patterns. A knock on his office door made him jump. Come in, he called, quickly minimizing his screens. Lieutenant Colonel Draven himself stepped in, his presence filling the small office. Staff Sergeant Santos, working late again? Yes, sir, just catching up on some paperwork. Draven's eyes swept across Tommy's cluttered desk. Admirable dedication, though I hear you've been asking questions about the Hartwell case. "Just trying to understand what happened, sir," Tommy replied carefully. "Sergeant Hartwell was a respected member of our unit." "Was being the operative word," Draven said smoothly. "Sometimes people aren't who we think they are." After Draven left, Tommy sat perfectly still, his mind racing. The lieutenant colonel's visit wasn't a coincidence. He knew he was being watched now. In her cell, Clarissa paced slowly, processing everything she knew about Draven. She'd never worked directly with him, but she'd noticed him at several classified briefings. He always seemed to be peripherally involved in sensitive operations, gathering information while maintaining a professional distance. A guard appeared with a dinner tray. "Mail call, Hartwell." He passed her a small envelope through the slot. Inside was a note from Tommy. "Found something. Video doctored, checking D's connections. Watch your back." Clarissa carefully destroyed the note, but its message filled her with renewed hope. She'd suspected the footage was fake. Now she had confirmation. But Tommy's warning about watching her back concerned her. If he was investigating Draven, he was putting himself at serious risk. Tommy spent the next several hours compiling his evidence. He documented every inconsistency in the video footage, created detailed technical analyses showing the digital manipulation, and mapped out a timeline of Draven's activities that corresponded with known intelligence leaks. The pattern was clear. Draven had been systematically selling information while framing others for his crimes. Clarissa wasn't his first victim, just his latest. Tommy found traces of at least 3 other Marines who had been discharged or imprisoned based on similarly fabricated evidence. He organized everything into a comprehensive report, making multiple copies and securing them in different locations. He knew he had to move carefully. Draven had resources and influence, and he'd already shown he was watching. As dawn approached, Tommy finished his work and sat back, exhausted but satisfied. He had what he needed to prove Clarissa's innocence and expose Draven's treachery. The evidence was irrefutable. The video manipulation, the timeline discrepancies, the pattern of false accusations. "Hang in there, Clarissa," he murmured, looking at a photo on his desk from their last deployment. Clarissa and him, both smiling, unaware of what lay ahead. The truth is going to come out. He gathered his findings, preparing to present them to the proper authorities. The sky was beginning to lighten outside his window, marking the start of a new day. One that would either bring justice or put him squarely in Draven's crosshairs. Tommy clutched his evidence folder as he walked toward Admiral Kellerman's office. His heart pounded with each step, but he kept his face neutral. The morning sun streamed through the hallway windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Just as he reached for the Admiral's door handle, a stern voice called out behind him. "Staff Sergeant Santos?" He turned to find Colonel Patricia Wells, the base commander, striding toward him. Her perfectly pressed uniform and severe expression made his stomach tighten. "Ma'am," he said, automatically standing at attention. "At ease, Staff Sergeant. I have urgent orders for you." She held out an official envelope. "You're being reassigned, effective immediately." Tommy's fingers went numb as he opened the transfer papers. "Alaska? But ma'am, I have important evidence regarding the Hartwell case that needs—" "These orders come directly from command," Wells cut him off. "You ship out in 48 hours. I suggest you start packing." Back in his office, Tommy sat at his desk, staring at the transfer papers in disbelief. Fort Wainwright, Alaska, about as far from the current investigation as they could send him. This wasn't a coincidence. He pulled out his phone to call his supervisor but found no signal. His computer wouldn't connect to the network either. They were already isolating him. In the detention center, Clarissa received the news of Tommy's transfer through a sympathetic guard. She paced her small cell, mind racing. First the frame-up, now this sudden reassignment. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a picture far more sinister than she'd imagined. Tommy worked frantically to copy his evidence, trying every secure channel he could think of. Each attempt met a dead end. Blocked emails, failed connections, corrupted files. Someone was actively preventing him from sharing what he'd found. He caught Colonel Wells watching him from across the courtyard during lunch. She was talking with Lieutenant Colonel Draven, both of them looking entirely too pleased with themselves. Later that afternoon, Tommy overheard a conversation through his office's thin walls. Wells' voice carried clearly. "Once the transfer is complete, the promotion board meets next month. Draven assured me my name is at the top of the list." "And the evidence?" another voice asked. "Will conveniently disappear during the move. Tragic computer failure, you understand?" Tommy's blood ran cold. The conspiracy wasn't just Draven. It reached into the highest levels of base command. Wells was trading her integrity for career advancement, helping to bury the truth about Draven's activities. He thought about other suspicious transfers he'd heard about over the past year. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, who'd questioned some irregular intelligence reports, suddenly sent to South Korea. Lieutenant James Foster, who'd noticed discrepancies in security logs, reassigned to Germany with no warning. The pattern was clear now. Draven had built a network of corrupt officers who helped him silence anyone getting too close to his operation. They were all complicit, all benefiting from their silence. In her cell, Clarissa connected more dots. She remembered other Marines who'd faced sudden accusations or unexpected transfers. Each time Draven had been peripherally involved. Each time the evidence had seemed solid but convenient. Tommy made one last desperate attempt to preserve the evidence. He encrypted his findings and sent them through multiple private channels to trusted contacts. But within hours, his computer crashed completely, a hardware failure that the tech team said would take weeks to recover from. That evening, as he packed his office, Colonel Wells appeared in his doorway. "I trust you understand the importance of following orders, Staff Sergeant?" "Yes, ma'am," Tommy replied, keeping his voice steady. "Good. Alaska's beautiful this time of year, perfect place for someone to reflect on their career choices." The threat was clear. Tommy watched her leave, understanding now why so many others had chosen to stay quiet. The system that was supposed to protect them had been twisted into a weapon against them. He managed to slip a coded message to Clarissa through his last care package delivery. "Network bigger than D. Wells involved. Others too. Don't trust command chain." Clarissa read the message and let it dissolve in water. She lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, processing the full scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just about one corrupt officer framing her. It was an entire network of senior officers protecting each other, trading favors, and silencing anyone who threatened their operation. As Tommy packed his belongings that night, he felt the weight of his failure. He had the evidence to clear Clarissa and expose Draven, but the same corrupt system that had helped frame her was now sending him to the frozen north, thousands of miles from where he could help. He looked at the transfer papers on his desk, Fort Wainwright's details mocking him with their finality. In 48 hours, he'd be gone, and with him, any immediate hope of exposing the truth. Lieutenant Colonel Draven sat in a dimly lit office, speaking in hushed tones with a man whose expensive suit marked him as someone who didn't belong on a military base. Viktor Petrov's face remained impassive as he delivered his message. "She cannot be allowed to testify," Petrov said, his accent barely noticeable after years in America. "Our associates are concerned." Draven leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. A trial would be problematic. Too many questions. Too much scrutiny. "Exactly." Petrov placed a thick envelope on the desk. "We have arranged for a solution. The prisoner transfer next week. There will be an accident." In her cell, Clarissa noticed subtle changes in the guard's behavior. Extra glances her way, whispered conversations that stopped when she got too close. Something was coming, but she couldn't piece it together yet. 2 days later, Master Sergeant Roberts briefed his transport team in a small conference room. "Standard prisoner transfer," he explained, pointing to a map. "We're moving Sergeant Hartwell to Fort Lewis for continued detention and trial preparation. Route takes us through Morrison Pass." The young Marines nodded, studying the twisting mountain road marked in red. None of them noticed the way Roberts's hand trembled slightly as he traced the route, or how he avoided meeting their eyes. In a warehouse across town, 4 men checked their weapons and studied identical maps. Their leader, a former Special Forces operator named Kane, outlined the plan. The target vehicle will be here. He indicated a sharp bend in the road. 2,000-foot drop on one side, rock wall on the other, clean and simple. Clarissa spent her last night in the detention center unable to sleep. The concrete walls seemed to close in around her as she paced, 5 steps each way. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. The transfer had been arranged too quickly with too little paperwork, but without proof, all she could do was prepare herself mentally for whatever came next. The morning of the transfer dawned cold and gray. Clouds hung low over the mountains, promising rain. Master Sergeant Roberts watched his team load their weapons with blank rounds, standard procedure for prisoner transport. In his pocket, he felt the weight of the real ammunition he'd been ordered to carry, just in case. Petrov's men positioned themselves along the route hours before sunrise. Kane set up his sniper position overlooking the sharpest turn, while his team prepared the devices that would appear to be falling rocks. Everything had to look like a tragic accident. At 0700 hours, Clarissa was led from her cell in full restraints. She cataloged every detail: the transport vehicle's worn tires, the nervous energy of the young Marines assigned to guard her, the way Roberts avoided eye contact. Her training as a sniper had taught her to notice small things, and everything about this transfer felt wrong. "Standard procedure," Roberts said mechanically as they secured her in the back of the transport vehicle. But his hands shook as he checked her restraints, and he'd positioned her on the side closest to the mountain's edge. The convoy pulled out under heavy clouds, 2 Humvees escorting the transport vehicle. As they left the base, Clarissa caught a glimpse of Draven watching from his office window. His satisfied smile sent a chill down her spine. The mountain road twisted upward through dense forest. Rain began to fall, making the asphalt slick. In his sniper nest, Kane tracked the convoy's progress through his scope, speaking quietly into his radio to coordinate with his team. Inside the transport vehicle, Clarissa felt every turn, every change in elevation. The young Marine across from her, Private First Class Martinez, kept glancing nervously at his watch. She noticed his magazine wasn't fully seated in his weapon, a rookie mistake that seemed out of character for someone selected for prisoner transport duty. Through the small window, she watched the terrain become more treacherous. 2,000 feet of empty air waited beyond the guardrail, obscured now by sheets of rain. The perfect place for an accident, the perfect place to make someone disappear. Roberts received a brief text message. "Package confirmed. Proceed to checkpoint." He deleted it immediately, then gripped the steering wheel tighter as they approached the designated turn. 20 years in the Marines, and this was what it came to: betraying everything he'd sworn to protect. In his hidden position, Kane chambered around and adjusted for wind and elevation. The rain would help sell the accident story. Poor visibility, slick roads, a tragic loss of control. His team waited with their equipment ready to create a convincing rock slide after the vehicle went over. The convoy approached the final turn, brake lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Clarissa tensed in her restraints, reading the signs she'd been trained to notice. The too perfect positioning, the isolated location, the nervous tension in her guards. This wasn't a transfer. It was an execution. The attack came without warning. A deafening explosion rocked the transport vehicle as hidden charges detonated, sending a cascade of rocks tumbling across the rain-slicked road. Master Sergeant Roberts jerked the wheel hard, but the heavy vehicle was already sliding toward the guardrail. Clarissa braced herself as the world turned upside down. Metal screamed against asphalt as the transport vehicle rolled, coming to rest on its roof 20 feet from the cliff's edge. The impact knocked Private Martinez unconscious, his unfastened weapon clattering to the floor, now ceiling, of the overturned compartment. Through the ringing in her ears, Clarissa heard precise, disciplined gunfire. The mercenaries were eliminating the escort vehicle's crews with professional efficiency. No witnesses, no survivors. Rain drummed against the twisted metal as she assessed her situation, hands bound behind her back with thick zip ties, suspended upside down by her seat restraints, blood rushing to her head. "Check the transport," a voice called out. "Make sure she's dead." Clarissa's mind raced. Martinez's dropped pistol lay 4 feet away, partially hidden under debris. With her hands bound, it might as well have been 40 feet, but she hadn't become an elite sniper by giving up when things looked impossible. Using her core muscles, she pulled herself up slightly and worked her feet free from their restraints. Blood trickled down her face from a cut on her forehead as she heard boots crunching on broken glass, approaching the overturned vehicle. "Got movement in here," one of the mercenaries called out. "2 bodies." Clarissa let herself go limp, playing dead. The mercenary's boots appeared in the shattered window frame. The moment he bent down to check Martinez's pulse, Clarissa struck. Her legs whipped out, catching the man's head in a scissor hold. One violent twist and his neck snapped. "Jensen?" "Report." Another voice, more cautious now. Moving with desperate speed, Clarissa contorted herself, managing to loop her bound hands under her legs and in front of her body. The maneuver sent fresh pain shooting through her shoulders, but she ignored it. She couldn't reach the zip ties with her teeth, but she could grip a weapon. 2 more mercenaries appeared at different windows, weapons ready. Clarissa had already retrieved Martinez's pistol with her bound hands. The first mercenary died before he could register her movement. The second got off 2 wild shots before her return fire caught him in the throat. "She's alive!" someone shouted. "Light it up!" Automatic weapons fire tore through the vehicle's thin walls. Clarissa pressed herself flat against what had been the roof, using the unconscious Martinez's seat as cover. She counted shots, waiting for the inevitable reload. When the firing paused, she rolled to the nearest window and squeezed off 3 rapid shots. A cry of pain told her at least one had found its mark, but she'd counted 5 distinct weapons in the initial ambush. At least 2 more shooters remained. Rain continued to pour through the broken windows as Clarissa checked Martinez's pulse. Still alive, but she couldn't help him yet. The zip ties dug into her wrists as she maintained her awkward grip on the pistol. 4 rounds left, make them count. Movement caught her eye, a shadow trying to flank the vehicle's rear door. Clarissa fired twice through the metal panel, rewarded by another shout of pain. 3 hostiles down, 2 to go. "Kane," one of the remaining mercenaries called out. "Take the shot." The sniper. Clarissa had almost forgotten. Her mind raced, calculating angles and likely positions. There, that ridge would provide the perfect firing solution on the crash site. And in this rain, there was only one spot with enough cover and visibility. Using the pistol's chrome slide as an improvised mirror, Clarissa caught a brief reflection of movement on the ridge. She took a deep breath, visualizing the shot. It would have to be perfect, firing one-handed, bound, upside down, using only her memory of the terrain. The next few seconds seemed to unfold in slow motion. Clarissa rolled into position as Kane's first shot punched through the vehicle's floor. She fired her last 2 rounds through the rear window, not at her attackers, but at a specific point on the ridge where she knew the sniper had to be. Her rounds sparked off rock, sending fragments into Kane's face. His reflexive flinch ruined his follow-up shot and exposed him to the last mercenary's field of fire. The final attacker, seeing his team eliminated by a bound prisoner, broke cover and ran. Clarissa could only watch through the broken windows as he disappeared into the rain. She had no rounds left to stop him. Silence fell over the crash site, broken only by the steady drumbeat of rain and the moaning of the wounded. Clarissa allowed herself one shaky breath before starting to work on freeing herself. She had to get help from Martinez, alert the authorities, and most importantly, figure out who had betrayed her. Because someone had just tried very hard to make her disappear, and they'd used professionals to do it. Using broken glass from the windows, she began sawing at her zip ties. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Captain David Rodriguez pulled his military police vehicle to a stop at the crash site, his windshield wipers fighting against the steady rain. The scene before him looked like something out of a war zone. The transport vehicle lay on its roof, surrounded by bodies and spent shell casings that glinted in his headlights. He stepped out into the rain, his trained eye immediately cataloging details. The positioning of the bodies told a story that didn't match anything in his experience. 5 dead mercenaries, all with precise shots to vital areas. No wild sprays of bullets, no collateral damage, just clean, efficient kills. "Sir?" A junior officer jogged up, holding a tablet protected from the rain. "We've got 3 dead in the escort vehicles, 1 wounded, Private Martinez, already evacuated to base hospital, and... He hesitated, checking his notes. Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell is secure but requiring medical attention for minor injuries. Rodriguez nodded, his attention caught by the peculiar pattern of bullet holes in the transport's rear panel. 2 shots, perfectly placed to take down a target he couldn't even see from inside an overturned vehicle. He crouched down, studying the trajectory. "Those are her shots," a calm voice said behind him. Rodriguez turned to see Clarissa sitting in the back of a medical vehicle, getting her wrists treated where the zip ties had cut into them. Despite her ordeal, she carried herself with quiet dignity. "You fired blind through the panel?" Rodriguez asked, his voice carrying both skepticism and growing curiosity. "Yes, sir. I calculated the likely position based on sound and tactical probability. The target was using the rock formation up there for cover." She pointed to the ridge with her bandaged hand. Rodriguez pulled out his flashlight and walked the scene, his mind racing. The evidence didn't lie, and it was telling him a very different story than the one in Clarissa's case file. These shots weren't lucky. They showed a level of skill that went beyond mere training. He paused at one of the bodies, noting the professional gear and military-grade weapons. "These weren't common criminals," he said, half to himself. "No, sir," Clarissa replied from where she sat. "They were professional contractors. Someone wanted this to look like an escape attempt gone wrong." Rodriguez walked back to the medical vehicle, studying Clarissa's face. The official charges claimed she had stolen access codes through computer infiltration, but looking at the evidence around him, a new picture was forming. "Sergeant Hartwell," he said carefully, "with your level of tactical ability, why would you need to steal access codes? You could have infiltrated any facility directly if that was your goal." A flash of something, relief perhaps, crossed Clarissa's face before her professional mask returned. "That's an interesting observation, sir." Rodriguez pulled out his tablet, scanning through the case files with new eyes. The alleged computer infiltration was clumsy, leaving obvious traces. But the scene around him showed someone who never made clumsy mistakes. "The evidence against you," he said slowly. "It's too perfect, too obvious, like someone wanted us to find it." "I wouldn't know about that, sir," Clarissa replied neutrally, but her eyes told a different story. Rodriguez walked the scene one more time, his flashlight beam catching another detail, the sniper's position on the ridge. The shot that had disrupted the sniper's aim hadn't been meant to kill. It had been precisely placed to create a ricochet effect, sending rock fragments into the shooter's face, the kind of shot that required intimate knowledge of ballistics and years of expert experience. He turned back to Clarissa. "You're a sniper, aren't you, not just a regular Marine?" "My record speaks for itself, sir." Rodriguez checked her file again. Most of it was classified, but the skills assessment scores were visible. They were the highest he'd ever seen. The rain continued to fall as emergency vehicles arrived with flashing lights. Rodriguez watched as crime scene technicians began documenting the evidence. Every bullet hole, every shell casing would tell the same story. This was no ordinary Marine being transported. This was someone with extraordinary capabilities who had taken down a professional hit team while bound and trapped in an overturned vehicle. "I'm going to need to review this entire case," he said finally. "Something isn't adding up." Clarissa met his gaze steadily. "I appreciate your thoroughness, Captain." As the scene was processed and Clarissa was prepared for transport back to base, Rodriguez couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple case of stolen access codes. The precision of those shots, the tactical awareness they demonstrated, everything about this scene contradicted the official narrative. He had been sent to investigate a prisoner transport incident. Instead, he'd found evidence that would force him to question everything about the case against Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell. Admiral James Kellerman sat in his office late into the evening, surrounded by case files and ballistics reports from the transport incident. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his desk as he studied photograph after photograph of the crash scene. Something about this case had been nagging at him for days, keeping him awake at night. He picked up Captain Rodriguez's preliminary report again. The shots fired during the ambush were described as Statistically improbable. Clean kills made from inside an overturned vehicle, while restrained with zero visibility of the targets. One shot in particular caught his attention, a precise ricochet that had disabled a sniper without killing him. "I've seen shooting like this before," he muttered, reaching for his coffee. The memory flickered at the edges of his mind, refusing to come into focus. His computer chimed with an incoming message. The ballistics analysis he'd requested had finally arrived. Kellerman opened the file, scanning through technical details until he reached the conclusion. Shot placement and precision consistent with fewer than 5 known marksmen worldwide. He leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting to another time, another place. Afghanistan, 6 years ago. His convoy had been heading through a mountain pass when they'd come under attack. They should have all died that day. Instead, an unknown sniper had saved their lives with shots that defied explanation. Kellerman pulled up Sergeant Hartwell's service record. Most of it was classified, but his Admiral's clearance gave him access to the full file. His eyes widened as he read through her deployment history. The dates matched. She had been there. His hands trembling slightly, he opened his personal files and found the after-action report from the convoy attack. The intelligence analysis had concluded that only 3 Marine snipers had the skill level to make those shots. 2 had been confirmed elsewhere during the attack. The third... "Dear God," Kellerman whispered. He pulled up side-by-side satellite images, the mountain pass in Afghanistan and the recent ambush site. The shooting angles were almost identical. The same impossible precision, the same tactical brilliance. He found himself back in that convoy, the sound of gunfire echoing off canyon walls. His driver dead, vehicles burning. Then the miracle. Precision shots that seemed to come from nowhere, taking down attackers one by one. The intelligence report had described the shooting as beyond expert level, showing an intuitive understanding of ballistics that borders on precognitive. Just like the transport ambush, Kellerman accessed the classified mission logs from that day in Afghanistan. There it was. Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell had been operating independently in that region, her presence known only to a handful of top-level commanders. The mission was so classified that even he, the man whose life she had saved, hadn't been allowed to know her identity. "She saved us all," he said softly, remembering the 23 men and women in that convoy who had made it home because of her. "And now we're destroying her." He spread the evidence across his desk, the obviously fabricated computer logs used to frame her, the suspicious timing of Staff Sergeant Santos's transfer, the professional hit team sent to silence her. The system he had served his entire life was being used to crush someone who embodied the highest ideals of that same system. The face from his courtroom now merged with the phantom sniper from his memories, the guardian angel who had appeared when all hope seemed lost. Kellerman had spent years wondering about that unknown shooter, wanting to express his gratitude. Now he finally knew, and she was sitting in a cell, betrayed by the very institution she had served with such distinction. He pulled out his phone and dialed a secure number. "This is Admiral Kellerman. I need everything you have on Lieutenant Colonel Harris Draven's communications for the past 18 months. Yes, I understand it's classified. Use my override code." He paused, listening. "And I want all surveillance footage from the base during the dates of the alleged computer intrusion. Every camera, every angle." Kellerman stood and walked to his window, looking out at the lights of the military base below. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. He had presided over the hearing that had started this nightmare for Clarissa. Now he had to make it right. He returned to his desk and began writing, his pen scratching against paper in the quiet office. As he worked, his mind kept returning to that day in Afghanistan, the day when one soldier's extraordinary skill and courage had saved 24 lives. He had been given a second chance that day. Now it was time to return the favor. The classified files on his desk told the story of a Marine who had repeatedly put herself in harm's way to protect others, never seeking recognition or reward. A warrior who had saved countless lives from the shadows, including his own. And now she faced destruction from the very institution she had served with such dedication. The morning sun cast long shadows through the high windows of the military courthouse, as Admiral James Kellerman organized the stack of files on his desk. Each document represented another piece of the puzzle: surveillance footage, communication logs, classified mission reports. Together, they told a story of corruption that made his stomach turn. He pulled out the most damning evidence: printouts showing Lieutenant Colonel Draven's encrypted communications with foreign operatives, carefully hidden but now exposed. Next to these lay the proof of Colonel Wells's complicity: records of suspicious promotions and transferred funds. Kellerman's hands trembled slightly as he touched the classified file detailing Clarissa's heroic actions in Afghanistan. The memory of that day still haunted him: the taste of dust, the crack of gunfire, the certainty that death was approaching. Then those impossible shots that had saved them all. Down the hall, in a small holding room, Clarissa Hartwell sat quietly. Her auburn hair was pulled back in its usual practical style, her posture straight despite the weight of handcuffs. She had changed into her dress uniform for what she believed would be her final appearance in military court. "Transport's ready, ma'am," a young MP said from the doorway. Clarissa nodded, rising with quiet dignity. She had accepted what was coming. Her career was over, her reputation destroyed. But they couldn't take her integrity. She knew the truth about herself, even if no one else did. In his private chamber, Kellerman slipped the final piece of evidence into his briefcase: the enhanced security footage showing how Clarissa's face had been digitally grafted onto another person's body. The technical analysis proved beyond doubt that the evidence against her had been fabricated. He thought about Tommy Santos, suddenly transferred to Alaska for getting too close to the truth. The young staff sergeant's loyalty to his friend had nearly cost him everything. Kellerman had already set in motion the orders to bring Santos back. He would be needed to testify. Lieutenant Colonel Draven entered the courtroom with his usual confident stride, nodding to his supporters in the gallery. Colonel Wells sat in the front row, her face a mask of professional concern, hiding her role in the conspiracy. They thought they had won. They believed their careful plan to destroy Clarissa Hartwell was about to succeed. Kellerman watched them through the partially opened door of his chambers. His jaw tightened as he observed their smug certainty. They had no idea what was coming. An aide approached with last-minute intelligence. 3 more officers had been implicated in the conspiracy. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had suspected. Kellerman added the names to his growing list, knowing that by the end of the day careers would be destroyed. But this time they would be the right ones. Clarissa was led into the courtroom, her chains clinking softly. She kept her head high, refusing to show weakness even now. The gallery whispered as she passed, some with contempt, others with uncertainty. The story of her incredible shooting during the transport ambush had spread, raising questions that didn't match the official narrative. Draven watched her entrance with barely concealed satisfaction. He thought he had won, thought his careful manipulation of evidence and systematic elimination of threats had secured his position. He had no idea that his encrypted communications had been decoded, that his network of co-conspirators was about to be exposed. Colonel Wells shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Something about Admiral Kellerman's delayed appearance made her nervous. She checked her phone again, perhaps sensing that the carefully constructed web of lies was about to unravel. The room fell silent as Kellerman finally entered. His silver hair caught the morning light, his weathered face grave with the weight of what he was about to do. He carried his briefcase like it contained explosives. In a way, it did. The evidence inside would shatter careers and expose a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the base command. Clarissa stood at attention, prepared to face what she believed would be her sentencing. She had maintained her innocence throughout the proceedings, but now appeared resigned to her fate. She couldn't know that Kellerman had spent sleepless nights piecing together the truth, that he had finally recognized her as the guardian angel who had saved his life years ago. The room hummed with tension as Kellerman took his place at the bench. He looked at the files before him. The true story of heroism and betrayal, of corruption and loyalty. His hand rested on the classified documents that would vindicate Clarissa and expose the real traitors. The bailiff called the court to order. Draven leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Colonel Wells touched the eagles on her collar nervously, and Clarissa Hartwell, decorated Marine and unsung hero, stood straight and proud, unaware that her long nightmare was about to end. "Sergeant First Class Clarissa Hartwell, please rise." Admiral Kellerman's voice rang through the courtroom with unexpected authority. Clarissa stood, chains rattling softly. Her face remained composed, though confusion flickered in her eyes. This wasn't how sentencing hearings usually began. Kellerman opened the classified file on his desk. "Before this court proceeds, there is a matter of record that must be addressed." He lifted his gaze to meet Clarissa's directly. On April 15th, 3 years ago, in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, a military convoy came under heavy attack. Lieutenant Colonel Draven shifted in his seat, his confident smile faltering slightly. "I was in that convoy," Kellerman continued, his voice growing stronger. "We were surrounded, outgunned, with no hope of survival. Then something extraordinary happened. A Marine sniper, positioned over 2,000 yards away, made a series of impossible shots that saved 38 American lives that day." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Colonel Wells's face had gone pale. "That sniper's identity remained classified, known only by their call sign." Kellerman held up a document. "Until now. Sergeant Hartwell, you were that sniper, weren't you?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. Clarissa stood perfectly still, her training holding even as her secret was revealed. "Yes, sir," she answered quietly. "The same precision shooting demonstrated during the recent attack on your prisoner transport," Kellerman pressed on. "The same extraordinary skills that made it completely unnecessary for you to ever steal access codes, because someone with your abilities could have infiltrated any facility directly." Draven was now visibly sweating, his eyes darting toward the exit. "This court has been presented with fabricated evidence." Kellerman's voice thundered through the room. "Digital manipulation of security footage, falsified documents, and a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of this base's command structure." He pulled out Tommy Santos's technical analysis. Staff Sergeant Santos discovered the truth before his sudden transfer. The evidence against Sergeant Hartwell was manufactured, and I know exactly who orchestrated this frame-up. Draven suddenly stood, knocking over his chair. "This is absurd, you can't—" "Lieutenant Colonel Harris Draven," Kellerman cut him off. "You are hereby charged with treason, conspiracy, and the attempted murder of a decorated Marine." Chaos erupted. Colonel Wells tried to slip quietly toward the door but found her path blocked by military police, who had been quietly positioning themselves around the room. Draven, seeing his carefully constructed world crumbling, made his move. He shoved his defense attorney aside and bolted toward the side exit. 2 MPs moved to intercept him, but Draven was faster, desperation lending him speed. "Stop him!" Kellerman shouted as the gallery erupted in screams and confusion. Clarissa, still in chains, assessed the situation with the same tactical precision that had made her an elite sniper. Draven was heading for the emergency exit. The MPs were blocked by panicked spectators. No one else was in position to stop him. Without hesitation, she dropped her shoulder and rammed into the bailiff beside her, sending them both sprawling. In the chaos, she managed to hook her foot around the bailiff's backup weapon, concealed in an ankle holster. Draven reached the door, yanking it open, but before he could step through, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Lieutenant Colonel Draven, freeze!" He turned to find Clarissa still handcuffed but somehow holding the bailiff's weapon with her feet, aimed perfectly at his chest. The entire courtroom fell silent at the extraordinary sight. "That's impossible," someone whispered. "Stand down, Colonel," Clarissa ordered, her voice steady despite her awkward position on the floor. Draven looked from her to the door, calculating his chances. The slightest shift in his weight told Clarissa all she needed to know about his intentions. "I can put a round through your shoulder before you make it 2 steps," she said calmly. "Would you like to test those odds?" The fight drained from Draven's face. He knew her reputation, had seen the reports of her shooting. He raised his hands slowly as MPs finally broke through the crowd to take him into custody. Colonel Wells was already in handcuffs, her career ending as quickly as the conspiracy had unraveled. Other officers implicated in the plot were being detained throughout the courtroom. Admiral Kellerman stood at his bench watching as orders slowly returned to his courtroom. He saw the MPs helping Clarissa to her feet, the bailiff staring in amazement at how she had managed to handle his weapon while restrained. "Remove those chains," Kellerman ordered. "They have no place on a hero." As the MPs secured Draven in handcuffs, a commotion erupted from outside the courtroom. Through the emergency exit's window, Clarissa spotted 3 men rushing toward a black SUV, Draven's backup plan. "Sir," she called to Admiral Kellerman, "they have a vehicle waiting." Kellerman nodded to the bailiff. "Give her your sidearm." The bailiff hesitated for just a moment before handing Clarissa his weapon. She quickly checked the chamber and sights, her movements precise and practiced. "Everyone stay back from the windows," she ordered, moving to the emergency exit. Through the glass, she could see the SUV's engine rumbling to life. The distance was about 50 yards, with the engine block partially obscured by the vehicle's angle. For most shooters, it would have been an impossible shot with a handgun, but Clarissa wasn't most shooters. She took a deep breath, adjusting for the glass thickness and bullet drop. The world narrowed to her sights and target as she exhaled slowly. Her fingers squeezed the trigger with deliberate pressure. The shot cracked through the courtroom. Through the window, the SUV's engine block erupted in a spray of fluid and smoke. The vehicle lurched once and died, trapping Draven's conspirators as MPs swarmed the parking lot. "I've seen that shooting before," Kellerman said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "In Afghanistan. You saved my entire convoy that day." Clarissa lowered the weapon. "I was just doing my job, sir." "No," Kellerman shook his head. "You were doing something extraordinary. And we failed you by not recognizing it then, and by nearly destroying you now." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Colonel Wells was processed into custody, her face ashen as she realized her promised promotion had turned into a prison sentence. Draven's network of conspirators was rounded up across the base, their carefully constructed scheme falling apart under the weight of truth. Tommy Santos was immediately recalled from Alaska. He arrived the next morning, grinning as he handed over his complete technical analysis of the doctored security footage. "I knew you were innocent," he said, hugging Clarissa tightly. "And now everyone else knows it too." A week later, Clarissa stood in her dress blues before a formal military review board. This time, instead of facing accusations, she received the recognition that had been denied her for so long. "For extraordinary heroism in combat," the citation read, "demonstrating exceptional valor and tactical excellence while saving 38 American lives." The Medal of Honor was placed around her neck, its weight familiar yet strange after so many years of carrying her achievements in silence. But it was the private meeting with Admiral Kellerman afterward that meant the most. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, standing in his office. "I owe you the truth. We feared your abilities instead of honoring them. We let that fear blind us to who you really are." Clarissa stood at ease, her new medal catching the afternoon light. "Sir, I never wanted recognition. I just wanted to serve." "I know," Kellerman smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve both." He picked up a folder from his desk. "Which is why I want you to consider this offer. We're establishing a new advanced sniper training program. These young Marines need an instructor who understands not just the skills but the responsibility that comes with them." He held out the folder. "They need someone like you, Sergeant Hartwell." Clarissa took the folder, her fingers tracing the emblem on its cover. Here was a chance to pass on everything she'd learned, to help shape a new generation of Marines who would understand that extraordinary abilities came with extraordinary duty. "When do I start, sir?" "As soon as you're ready," Kellerman replied. "And Clarissa? Thank you, not just for saving my life back then, but for showing us all what real honor looks like now." She left his office into the bright afternoon sun, the Medal of Honor around her neck and her new orders in hand. Young Marines snapped to attention as she passed, no longer seeing a prisoner but a hero whose true story had finally come to light. Tommy was waiting by her car, his new captain's bars gleaming. "So does this mean I have to call you ma'am now?" Clarissa laughed, feeling truly free for the first time in months. "Only if you want to run extra laps in my first training class." They both knew he'd be there, helping her build something new from the ashes of the conspiracy that had tried to destroy her. Not just a training program, but a legacy of honor, skill, and unwavering integrity. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.